Hihaniwashte, Peveshev, Mene Wostatnanehev. My name's Krystal Tubles. I'm Oglala Lakota, raised in Northern Cheyenne Territory. I'm the daughter of Lynette Tubles, granddaughter of Melvina Winters, and great-granddaughter of Matt and Nellie Tubles. I just wanted to mention their names here today. I just want to start off by thanking the WILD12 Foundation for creating this space here and coming to Oceti-Sakowee territory. I also want to thank the Shichangu Lakota Oyate Treaty Council for the invitation and hosting everyone. And I also want to thank all of the previous speakers that have shared and our spiritual leaders that have come up and done such a beautiful job of setting the stage for the conversations to happen here. I think it's important. I heard the gentleman speaking earlier about not writing down your speech and what you're going to say. And my dad says that to me too. He said, just pray and speak from the heart, and that, you know, what we're sharing is what needs to be heard, and that it happens that way. And it's usually how I go. I did write down a few notes this morning though, because there's been such good speakers. And there's been so many things that have been coming up that I wanted to make sure that I captured some of that and I reflected on some of that. And so I do have a few notes. But I also want to start off just by saying free Palestine and land back. I say that because our struggles are intertwined, and I think the conversations that we've been hearing here the last few days so far have showed us that, right? I also say that because land back, I know there's pushback around it, and you know, as always, there's critique and there's conversations and contradictions to engage. But I think fundamentally, when a younger generation like myself says land back, I think what we're saying is that there were doctrines such as the doctrine of discovery or the doctrine of domination that my good friend Steve Newcomb talks about and specializes in. Just wanted to mention his name here as well, but we were talking yesterday and we were talking about the colonial systems and settler colonialism and the impacts on our people, and how that is the foundation and that is what we are building on top of, is we're continuing to build on top of a colonial foundation by continuing to engage in colonial systems. And I think what land back is saying is that that happened, and we're acknowledging that. We're also naming that we were fully thriving economies and societies pre-colonization, right? And so what we're presenting when we say land back is the reclamation of ourselves. Because the way that I was taught and the way that I was raised was that we are the land. We have songs and we have stories and we have teachings and ceremony that literally tell us we are the land. There is no separating the indigenous peoples from land. There's not a separation there. So when we're saying land back, we're not talking about the land. It didn't go anywhere. It's still here. We're talking about ourselves in the way that we were forcibly removed from it, and that our relationship to it was severed because of settler colonization. So as we go forward, it's just something to think about as we present conversations and solutions and alternatives and ways to navigate climate crisis and climate catastrophe and climate change, right? In my homelands, we just came and we were a little bit delayed because there was fires. And you know, in previous years, I had almost lost my home, and so I went out and volunteered. So we were a little delayed getting here, and we missed the Sunday's doings. But we made it, and that was because of massive fires in our lands, you know? And so I think that when we say that we're reclaiming ourselves, what we're talking about as well is we're talking about what the elements of a thriving society is. And that's our language, our culture, our spirituality, our ways of life, right? But it's also our housing, our education, our healthcare, our kinship systems, our governance systems, and our legal systems, all of which still exist, right? All of which our ancestors sometimes sacrifice life so that way we can continue to maintain those things, right? And maintain that knowledge. And so when we say land back, that's what we're talking about, is reclaiming all of those fundamental elements of what it takes to be a fully thriving, healthy society. All of the things that currently, specific to the US, we're struggling with, right? And so just naming that. But also, I believe wholeheartedly that we already have the solutions. Those already exist within indigenous peoples and with indigenous communities. And we've heard them so far. We've heard many speakers sharing. We've heard them talk about this. Those answers already lie here. They already lie within us. They already lie within the communities that we come from. I also see with that is that it's oftentimes women that are leading the way. It's oftentimes women who are spearheading all of those initiatives around language revitalization, right? Food sovereignty, around housing, right? I know right now with Red Cloud Renewables down in Pine Ridge, not too far from here, there's a full cohort of women learning how to use green building blocks, hemp blocks, learning solar, learning these things, right? And so it's oftentimes women that we see leading these. And so with that, I wanted to really take this moment this morning, one, to talk about the things that I felt like I needed to share and felt called to share, but also more importantly, to name how important women are and name that. To also name that women are the backbone of our societies. They are. And also to say that we play many different roles. Some of us are out here sharing on a public platform. Some of us are behind the scenes, making sure that all the logistics and the details are taken care of. Some are preparing the food and taking care of the home and tending to that. And some are out there traveling the world to make sure that human rights and indigenous rights are at the forefront. And so we play so many different roles. And with that, I just want to take a minute and offer the rest of my time that I have here up on stage by acknowledging 4 women that have been a part of my life and that I look to, that have mentored me and that I've learned from directly. And so I want to call out my mom, Lynette, my auntie Lori Pourier, and we have Faith Spotted Eagle and Casey Camp here, and I'm going to pass the mic over to them to share a little bit this morning and share the rest of my speaking time. Thank you.
Mitakiapi, Chantewashta Napa, Chuzapi, Duwayakiapi, Hemia. Good morning, my relatives. I want to greet each and every one of you today, and I want to say it's really an honor to be here and to listen to all the beautiful words and speakers and the wisdom that was up here on the stage the last couple days, and the wisdom that's out there too. We're taught that each of us has a gift to share and to offer the world. And when we tap into those gifts and we share them with people on the outside, it makes our circle stronger. And to see my daughter up here sharing, teachings that were passed down to her and through all of us, through the wisdom of our grandmothers and our grandfathers and our ancestors that have gone on before us. We always give credit to them. We're not here on our own behalf. We're here because of them. And because of the sacrifice of our ancestors, we're still here today. We're still here today. And, the elders here, I feel like I guess I'm a young elder. I'm moving into that category, but I'm still kind of hanging on to my youth too, so. But it's an honor to be sitting up here, and I'm very proud of my daughter. One of the things we were talking about on our way over here from Northern Cheyenne, I've lived over there for about 25 years, but I was raised, in my homelands, the Payabia community on Pine Ridge Reservation, raised by my grandparents, Matthew and Nellie Tubles, and I'm so blessed to have been taught, and to become the person I am because of them. I owe everything to them and to the Creator too. but we were talking on the way over here about our names and the importance of our traditional names. And my grandparents named many, many children, and they have so many Hunka relatives. And but they named my older girls, and I raised 4 daughters, and now I'm surrounded by little boys because of my grandson. So I'm really blessed that way too. But my daughter's name, I was telling her her Lakota name. She has two. She has a Lakota name and a Cheyenne name. And her Lakota name is Iuha Wakasotawe. And that was given to her by my grandparents. And they said they prayed about it. That's what I was telling her on the way over. They prayed over her and prayed about it. And the name that came to them was Iuha Wakasotawe. And they told me, and they said that she's going to be, what they see for her is that she's going to be a generous person. She's going to give away what she has for the people. And it's so, to think back on it now and to see her life and how it's manifesting and how she is helping the people physically, but also through her words and sharing and knowledge and being on the front lines of a lot of movements and creating change. And that makes me happy because the blessing that my grandparents gave her through that name, it's manifesting. And myself, Duanya Kiapiwi. My father was, he's gone now, but he was a scout. And he was in Vietnam, and he served many tours over there. But he spoke the Vietnamese language fluently, and they would send him in first. He would go in first. And so my grandparents named me that. They said that I would go ahead and I would make a way for the people. And I never really thought about it too much when I was young, when I got that name. But today, it means so much. And that's what I teach my children, is that they need to live that life and serve the people, because we come from chiefs. I come from Man Afraid of His Horse. And that Payabia community, that's the community that he settled in. And my grandmother always told me that he was a peace chief, but he was put in that position by the people. He didn't put himself there. The people put him there. And that we should always serve the people and put that ahead of everything. And so those are the values that were instilled in me, and those are the values that I instill in my children. And today, I'm a director of a nonprofit that I co-founded, Yellowbird Lifeway Center, and that's what we do. We serve our community from the ground up and from the back forward. So I'm going to say that much. Thank you, and I'll pass it to Lori.
Hihani washte, mitakiapi, makasi tomni omaniwi, imachiapi, Lori wasichia, Kishto, Oglala Lakota. I was born and raised on Pine Ridge, and both of my grandmothers were teachers in this thing we call art, our artist. My grandmother is Alice Sherman. She taught her whole life on the res. My other grandma is Olivia Blackout, and she made star quilts and was very busy every graduation. I remember growing up preparing all the quilts for the graduations. But I'm up here to support the women, and my work began with the Indigenous Women's Network, and we were one of the founders of Honor the Earth. And the clan mothers from all across the nation grounded our work at the Indigenous Women's Network. And they had what they called this first circle and the second circle. And so when there was conflict within the first circle, the clan mothers would gather. And so it was the clan mothers that brought me to the work at Indigenous Women's Network, and worked for many years with some beautiful, beautiful, wonderful women who I cherish and miss today. One of them is my dear sister, Ingrid Washnawata, and Nilak Butler and Marcia Gomez. So I just want to bring them in the room because they fought for all of us in a really good-hearted way, always in the work, and that's how I carry my work today because of the sisters. And Ingrid was taken from us in Colombia, and she was murdered by the FARC, along with Lahe. And so I carry their work with me today, and they're not with us, but I know they would be proud to see the good work that Krystal's doing. Ingrid's family was also from Palestine. She was married into Ali El Isa there. And so they met in Cuba. And so they started a lot of this work that's happening today. And grateful to be here. I do work today with First Peoples Fund. And Krystal talked about we really were in charge of our own economies. And so on Pine Ridge, we have the first Oglala Lakota art space. And that's to lift up the tradition keepers, you know, those that are passing on the language and the songs and the ceremonies. And I traveled this continent to honor those tradition keepers, and just came from Alaska and spent several days with Lynette here, who's also a Community Spirit Award honoree for First Peoples Fund, and so was Grandma Nellie Tubles. And Dolores Churchill is 95 years old now, and we just spent some wonderful time with her. And these are the weavers and the women that are quietly working in their community and upholding those traditional values and ways of knowing instinctively in a real quiet way, but really holding the hand of the children, you know. And we sat and we listened to Dolores for a couple of days, really passing on the knowledge to the younger generations. And so I just want to say Lila Wopila Tanka Ichichie for inviting me up here, Krystal. Palamayo. Oh, you go ahead first.
Judy, we ke panka abadi, manchte panka, Oklahoma. Greetings, my name is Judy, my true name. My colonized name is Casey Camp Hornick. I'm from the occupied territory of Oklahoma right now. And originally, our people are from Nebraska and what's now called South Dakota territory. Listening to these young women is really an honor to me. Thank you. Thank you for who you are and what you do. And it spurred many thoughts. I think we could take the rest of the day just with the stories that have been started right here. I was listening to Krystal, and thank you for inviting us to be part of this day. Say that we're the backbone of the society. And I believe that we're also the womb of the society. That we understand that water is the first medicine. And that from the womb, metaphorically or physically, comes life through the sacred water. I sit here in front of the buffalo, where the buffalo sits in front of me. And I'm recognizing so much and thinking so much of many things. I was thinking of the descendants, the way that they know their lineage. That's part of what ties us to this sacred land that you call the United States or you call America. my descendants are already down into the greats. But when I was going to think of my ancestors to speak of, I thought already they're with me. But my grandparents would have been born in the 1800s, and my great-grandparents also in the 1800s. My parents were born in 1914, born into captivity on a reservation in Oklahoma, the first of the generations of Ponca to ever be born into captivity, into a place where you couldn't leave or you would be killed, in a place where they had kept the sacred seeds from us, and the hunting instruments and the fishing instruments and the sacred instruments. But our people continued along our way for several reasons. 1 in 3 of us died on that forced removal. 1 in 3 of us died after we were put into the hot country. But I remember my mama talking about her auntie, her blind auntie, who carried her little brother who had passed away. But she carried him on her back, walking 100 miles and 100 miles and 100 miles and 100 miles. She was just a little child herself. I remember another auntie that carried 4 stones from our fireplace all the way to Oklahoma. She had to hide those stones from the soldiers because we were to take nothing with us when we left. That way we would be sure and die. But she snuck those stones down there because that's how deep the relationship we have to our Mother the Earth is, that those stones kept us alive because they too have a spirit that they wanted to share with us. Living beings, the stone people, that were going to help us to regenerate. I remember the stories of how the soldiers would separate the young women from the men folks who were shackled and weaponless so that they could use them at night. The screams. I remember the stories of how they would come through our village and grab our children by the braids and toss them into wagons, and later the same way for the boarding schools once we got down there. This is not a distant history. This is the American Holocaust that is still happening in this land today. It has different ways. And yet there are certain things that have helped us. The spirits have guided us to the point that we're speaking your language. We understand your religion. We know your social mores. We know your history. And that is our power at this moment, is to be able to be with you and tell you the story so that not only will you empathize with our history, but listen to your own future wrapped in the knowledge of the indigenous wisdom that let us sneak those sacred seeds, that allowed us to have the Stone Nation help us to survive. And the wisdom of the grandmothers and grandfathers that told us the ways to stay intact. I listened to these young women speak. They never said I. They said we. They said what we do is for the people. What they said is what we do is for the future of all of our generations. not just the red nations that we're caretakers of. And within the place that I happen to be with my daughters, with my sons, with my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, I'm blessed to be able to caretake the drum of my great-grandmothers and beyond them, the Padata. And that's a society that white folks called a scalp dance society, and in reality, it's a victory dance. And we had to hide those in different ways, but yet this sacred drum has always carried our history and our language within it. And within the history of the Padata came the knowledges of how the grandmothers paid attention to the villages that they were in at that moment, to the families, to the clans, and to the village, and to the greater earth at large. And that still goes on. Within this time of the purification, when the Mother Earth is purifying herself through the natural laws of wind, water, fire, then we are helping to be able to give a direction forward and to pay attention to what are the needs in our village, even though we are highly in the Ponca territory, polluted by the extractive industry. Just as right here, this area, is being open to mining and uranium, the precious minerals that they talk about for the new cars coming up. That's all on indigenous territories everywhere these things are happening. But at the same time, the largest contingency to the UN is oil and gas, and the second largest contingency is indigenous peoples, because indigenous wisdom is being included in virtually every area because we pay attention to what are the needs within our territories. The needs right now, we begin to look at things like in Ponca country with the help of Women's Earth and Climate Action Network and others. We have constructed the first earthen lodge that's been put up in over 150 years because it is tornado resistant, because it is cool. It is cool in the summertime, it is warm in the wintertime. It is part of the Mother Earth, and she directs us. I mean, the Earthen Lodge herself. It was really amazing to me to find out that when the first layer of her skin came on top of the sacred wood that was put there and the earth began to cover herself, the men folks did this for us. It's a woman's place, the home is. The Montnti, the Earthen Lodge, is a woman's place. It's passed from the woman to her daughters. That's the way it goes, and that's in the Padata. That's part of our teachings as well. But without the men to help us construct and follow the instructions, that wouldn't have happened. There's a balance that is so necessary in society at this time. So these are very good. Thank you for whoever is saying that, because we talk a lot about patriarchy. I heard a little applause over here. We talk a lot about misogyny. And we who are women, who understand how to be a woman, is to assume the power of a woman that already exists. And to give it in love, not to say, follow a woman's way, it's the only way to be, but to be that other half holding up the sky. This whole universe is male and female energy, not masculine and feminine, but male and female energy. And the suppression of the woman energy has caused an imbalance, but it's also something that women have to understand. You're only suppressed and oppressed if you also agree to it. Yeah. So for us as Padata, when our men folks went out and they brought home things from raids, from hunts, from fishing, from whatever it was, our Padata knew within our village what was important at that time. We knew who was widowed. We knew a elder man that no longer had his companion. We knew who had small children that needed the help. We knew those who might have meat, but they don't have grain. We knew somebody who had given away their blankets, so they might need blankets, or they might need a buffalo hide to lay on, or a ceremonial item, or whatever it was. And our Padata then would gather those things and make sure that everyone was cared for. This today, what you see right here, is the same thing. The exact same thing. We live in a modern day time, but we live within our communities, a community of human beings, of two-legged beings that are striving to come back into balance with what has to be done. We humans aren't necessary in this sacred cycle of life. We've been like fleas and ticks, just trying to suck the blood, but not to encourage back life. And that's what we have to do, is to understand that we have to encourage life. So within our communities, we look at what needs to be done, and we do it. We don't wait for somebody else. I was in a community after Standing Rock, and it was non-Indigenous. I kind of hesitate to say just a white woman, but it was. And she said, why don't you, whenever you set up your next camp, let me know. I'll be there. I said, same to you. Next time you set up a camp to protect the water and protect the earth, I'll be there. And that's what I want to offer back to WILD12. I see their logo here and there. It's time for everyone to take a stand. Go to the streets. Get out there. We outnumber those fools that are calling themselves the powers. We outnumber those that consider themselves leaders. We're the leaders. And unless we take charge, unless we step outside of our comfort zone, because all of us, we would rather be home, sitting in our homes, enjoying our grandchildren, sowing, tending our gardens. But instead, we're making community gardens. Instead, we're helping these earthen lodges, these ceremonies that my little relative here does for bringing women back in. Instead, we're the people in the foundations. Understand that humans can be extinct. We're unnecessary. But we can also come back into balance. And we're this close to turning that corner. But everybody has to be that person. That person. Everybody has to say, they're not doing right in Palestine. Those are my babies. Those are our homes. Everybody has to look at Israel and say they can't be destroyed either. Everybody has to look in the United States and say we have to care for the indigenous people's viewpoint, cosmology, and uphold the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People because they're our neighbor. And protecting their sovereignty protects me as well. Listen to your mama. Bye.
Oh, Peter. Oh, Peter, little sister. I asked Wakasotamwi to put me last. That way she can go like this. I could talk all day long, so I have a limit. Toka inajiwi he me eksto. Dakota me chaje kin toka inajiwi he buduhaki. My grandmother was a survivor of the Whitestone Massacre, and I carry her name. I carry her thoughts, her fears, her vision for what it is that Casey and all the women up here talk about, our obligation to follow the laws of natural law. So I come here as a mother, first of all, as a grandmother, a kunshi. There are differences. The Western Lakota say unchi. The Eastern Dakota say kunshi. So I come here as both. And I also come here with what is called the original instructions that our brother Ilarian talked about this morning, about the original constructions. And what I'm going to speak from is a very much alive governance system of women societies. In our language, we call it Okura Kichia, which means a special group of sisters. There are also men Okura Kichia, but the thing that we observe is what little sister Casey said, is that when the patriarchs left, they appointed a lot of patriarchs in our villages, in our Oyanke, our camps. And those patriarchs are still there. We do not use anger with them. We use compassion. We use teaching. And they're our grandchildren, so we have to somehow bleed that patriarchy out of them. And so last night we did a women's ceremony at the Indigenous Circle, and we had young men behind us that protected us at Standing Rock because there was a patriarchy there. But you know, grandmas and moms, we can't keep quiet. And so they were there to protect us as we presented our governance structure. And you need examples of what that looks like, and it starts with our children. So I come from a society, I come from a grandmothers that lived to a ripe old age because we didn't have pesticides in our food. I was raised by a Kushi that lived to be 104. Her mother lived to be 94. My grandpa lived to be 107, so I am hoping I have their genes so I can be around for another 30 years. I want to tell you some stories because part of Wo'ope travels in the stories that are very, very old. The first story that I want to tell you is as a mother. As a mother, when my children went to the most violent system of all, which is American schools. So my daughter goes to school, and by the way, my daughter is my revolution, and she will be here Friday. So I am privileged to share her with you on Friday. And when she was a little girl, she went to this violent system, and she's been raised in a society, so she comes home one day. And when I tell these stories, I tell people these are settler stories, and my son said, "Mom, you got to quit calling them settlers because they get their feelings hurt." And I said, "They are settlers." So I'm just truth. And so this is a settler story. And so my daughter comes home one day, and she says, "Ina, I think you need to go see my teacher." And this is also about TEK, ecological knowledge, because these filters have to be paid attention to. It's a settler lens. Whenever we sign MOUs, we have to be there. From our governance system of women's Ukoraki chef. So she says, I said, "What happened?" She said, "Oh, my teacher likes to have visions." She said, "We have to visualize coming over in this boat. And I'm on this boat, and I have to write a visualization how I feel about being on the boat." And I looked at her in shock, and I said, "What did you say?" She said, "I think my Ina said I would be on the shore." I said, "You betcha, my girl. You answered correctly, and I'm going up to that school." So I went up to that school, and it was the process of convening all of my kids' teachers at the beginning of every fall to tell them that you are getting my gift and you better treat them good. We are doing this in this MOU.
We are sharing a sacred bundle of Wizipa of the Black Hills. The Missouri River is a bundle. Archaeologists call it cultural landscape, but it's way more than that, because you know what? Archaeologists were not born in the Forest Service and the Park Service probably in the 1900s. These bundles are old. And so I share with the teacher, and I said, this is our woape, you got to treat my gift good. So my girl goes back to school, and about a month later she comes back and she says, Ina, she did it again. I said, oh no, what did she do? The first time I went, the teacher was kind of reluctant to listen to me, and she was probably thinking, who is this? But I had to add my credentials in the Western world. I'm a certified teacher. I'm a certified counselor. I have been a principal. 100 pounds ago, I was a basketball coach in a school. And so I have standing in school systems, so I go back in. And my little girl, I said, tell me the story. What did she say? The settler lands? She said that we have to visualize, because this teacher likes visions, so that's a point for her. But she says, we're going across the plains. We're in a Conestoga wagon. I thought, oh no, here we go again. And my daughter, my girl, says, I don't think so. I think we would be circling that wagon. I said, you're right, my girl, I'm going back up to the school. So that teacher, by then, she knew I was coming, and I think sometimes I have a scary part of me that I don't recognize. And I walked into the room, and she said, oh, Mrs. Barrigo, I am so sorry, and she started to cry. And I said, don't cry, because we have work to do, or you have work to do, and I'm going to teach you. So that was the beginning of our relationship, and it didn't end, just like it's not going to end when we sign these MOUs. Those natural governance systems have to be in there because we carry those stories. They're very, very old. And I'm going to share with you 2 more stories, and then you can cut me off. But the first one, my story of Wo'ope was when I was about 4 or 5 years old. I was with my grandmother, who lived to be 104. She knew the land. She knew the stories. And they say that each one of you carry at least 300 to 400 years of oral history, even if it's settler history. And yours was hard because you were driven out of Europe. We didn't have immigration laws then, but we have 20/20 hindsight. But one of the things that she told me one day, we were going after water because we took water from a natural source. And we were walking along, and all of a sudden she remembered something. Taku kiksuya. She said, Takoja, dechia hiu, come sit over here. And she took me through the weeds, a lot of invasive plants had come by then. And we sat on this bank, and she went like this, Iotaka, Takoja, sit still. So I'm sitting there and looking up at my kunshi, who is everything to me. And she takes, every good woman should carry a knife. I won't tell you where mine is right now. They'll probably escort me out. But she took her mina out, and she started to dig on the bank. And she dug, and then she took out a clod of dirt. And she said, here, Takoja, Nija, Ichano, do it. So I thought, I get to use Grandma's mina. So I took it, and I dug, and I got me a little clod. And so I was watching her, and she said, Wota, we're going to eat this dirt. And I said, we're going to eat this dirt? And she said, Takoja, hetaku wowa shake, okna ed. There's strength in there. There's medicine. So I saw her, and she took a bite of that clod, and she was chewing it, looking out across the creek. And then I didn't do it right away because I was looking at her, and she kind of nudged me. She said, eat it. And so I took my little clod, I took a bite, and I was sitting there happy as could be with my kunshi. And there began a lesson about what was in the earth. So fast forward, I noticed that these movements, and on the national, global level, which we all are involved in, when you take it to the local level, we have boundaries that are governed by federal agencies, state agencies. And we thought, we can't get in that door because it's a closed system. So how do we get into that closed systems? So the grandmas who govern Braveheart Society prayed about it and thought about it, and they said, we're going to go inside that closed system. You know how we're going to do it? We're going to lease land. So we studied leasing our own land. It took us about 5 years to figure out the process, how to bid against all the farmers who control our complete occupied territory at Ihangtoa. And we realized they're making billions off of us because we're not taking care of our own land. And the grandma said, we're going to bid. We don't have any money. That's okay. We'll worry about that later. We don't have to pay until March. We have 4 months. And so we bid. I felt strange bidding against these big farmers, 120 an acre, 150 an acre. Mine was like 40 an acre. I was kind of embarrassed, you know, my shame. And the BIA officer told me, you get precedence. You could knock out their bid. And I said, I can? I have 4 months to find $5,000? I can do it. So we bid on that first parcel of land. We now have 4 tracts of land that we are leasing. We are addressing invasive species which have not been managed well on our land. I know what Indian whipgrass is. I know what knotgrass is. I know what brome grass is doing, and it's destroying our forests, our prairies. It is invading, like when Art Zimiga yesterday said that when we gave you peace, you took peace and pieces and pieces. So brome grass has destroyed our prairie. I know that now. I see it. We need plants. You call them grandma's oats. We call it kunshi watoto. We have a name for all of those. So now when we, NRCS, we became an equipped client. I love walking in there when those farmers come in with their sons and they're signing their commodities report. I love that. I get to walk in there, and this group came in and they had one paper to sign because they had one lease. I walked in with the grandmas and we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 commodity reports. And the looks that we got from those settlers was sad because it's about land. It's still about land taking. So I sent them a prayer because they have hard times. Yes. They will never own their equipment, but we can because we own the land. Mm-hmm. And so we now are in the midst, NRCS came and said what they're going to do soil tests. And I said, well, I'm going to tell you, we're going to tell you where you do the soil tests. I'm going to protect where I ate dirt. And they said, what? And so I said, long story, but we now govern how our land can be taken care of, because the land game is we have to be part of your culture in those federal systems, but we also have to guide them. It's very important to guide them. The other story that I want to tell you is about the Buffalo Nation. This is understanding that has been infiltrated by the patriarchy. So I hear a lot of the men that we love, our sons, our Buffalo managers, they always tell this story. And they say, the Buffalo Nation, natural law, the men would circle, the Buffalo males would circle the women. The women would be in the second circle. The children would be in the Hochoka, the center. It's a good story, and parts of it is true. But parts of it is a patriarchal excuse. Because the story of the buffalo is on natural law. Natural law says that we follow the Pte Oyata as the Dakotas. I'm from the Eastern dialect. I'm also Lakota. I'm also Nakota. But the matrilineal law of the buffalo is that the grandma buffalo is the boss. She doesn't walk as a boss, she walks as a grandma. When they move to a different place to graze, guess who is in the lead? Who is in the lead? Grandma. Kunshi decides, okay, grandsons, we got to move. This plant has to survive. You don't eat that plant. It's not ready. Move away. Okan, make room. And grandma goes off in the distance and they follow her. The story I'm going to tell you was told to me by a buffalo manager who is my nephew's son. His name is Wayne Frederick. He was buffalo manager like his father, that is Sichongu, and I'm part Sichongu, so I have standing to tell this. But he told us a story about his learning from the buffalo, and this is on the ground front line. It's not on paper, it's not in MOUs, it's actually being with the buffalo. He stepped back from the buffalo because he said, I've shot too many of them, and it weighs heavy on my heart, because we shoot them for our people to eat. But he said, I've done that too much, I have to step back. But one of the stories that he shared, two actually, that are very powerful, he said that, okay, the story about the men surrounding, because right now the men are not always surrounding us. That's why we're here. So we're teaching, we're hoping, we're visioning, and we're believing, and we will never give up on them because they're our grandsons. But he said that there was this herd that they were watching at St. Deglishka College, and he said they went out to check on the buffalo, him and some of the other staff, and they saw this large dog, a res dog, chasing the calves of the buffalo herd. And it had taken one down, and the rest of the buffalo started moving. And of course, that dog would probably have to be shot because it was a danger to the herd. But guess what? The buffalo took care of it. And guess who led the charge? Who led? Grandma. He said he watched it, and he was quite amazed because that dog had all the power of thinking that he was a biologist. He had a BA, he had a master's, he had a PhD in range management, but he didn't have buffalo wisdom. So he's circling the herd, and all of a sudden, something happened. One of the grandma Kushis, Pteoyata, stepped out of the herd. And it's almost like she gave directions to the herd. And she put her head up. She threw her head up to that dog. And she went back into the herd. And all of a sudden, the herd opened up. And that dog, because he only had a PhD in range management, came into that opening in the herd. He walked into the trap that Kunshi set. He walked into that herd, and guess what happened to the rest of the herd? They closed in. They closed in because they probably wouldn't have, I don't know if they've been able to catch him on the run, on the long game, but they closed in on that herd, and the herd was milling. The dust was coming up, and all of a sudden, my nephew's son, and he said they called that dog Mufasa. He said all of a sudden Mufasa was thrown up in the air. He was dead. They took care of him. And the one who took the first blow was Kunshi. And he was thrown up. They didn't make him suffer. He came back down, and the herd moved in, and they killed him. The herd was safe. So that's a native governance system that has to be on the stage, in the talks, in the teaching, in the what you call TEK. We call it WOAPE. TEK is too long of a word, and it leaves a lot out. And so we are here to share. I did get invited by Julie Cahoon, I believe, is on your trustee board, right? Is there anybody that can verify that? Yes? She invited me because we have a long history of walking with Mother Earth, because Mother Earth is also a grandma. She called me and she said, you need to be there. And I noticed her book has been published, so please pick up commercial. Julie's book is now published, and it's out on the table, so I thank her for inviting me. And I'm also here because I'm going to share my daughter on Friday. She doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to bring her here. And my kids are my revolution coming from that native governance system. My daughter, when she was raised in the society, we told her, based on those stories in the school system, you're not always going to be able to talk and assert those teachings. You have to craft it. It has to be strategic, like the buffalo grandma, and then you strike. And so she is my revolution, but she also noticed something by growing up in this society. She said, Ina, that's not enough. I noticed that we went to court with the Corps of Engineers about the burials that they disturbed in our sacred sites. She said the one that the court gave credence to was the white anthropologist and the white archaeologist who had PhDs. She said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go make policy. So my daughter, Mahbia Wachinwi, Standing Cloud, has a PhD in anthropology from the University of Washington. And she has cultural knowledge. I'm going to close with the last story, I promise. And it's from my grandson. So this work is intergenerational. My grandchildren's 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 have to carry these stories to survive. So last year, my grandson, whose name is Tokana Ikbanaji, the first to rise, he's 9 years old. I pick him up for school. Same thing as my daughter. I thought, oh no, I thought I took care of this. He gets in and he says, Kushi, do you know who my favorite president is? I thought, oh no. I knew he was going to say Lincoln. He said, President Lincoln's my favorite president. And my face must have fell while I was driving. I probably swerved towards a ditch. And I said, oh, Takoja. He said, what, Kushi? And I said, well, President Lincoln hung 38 plus 2 of our Dakota people, the largest hanging in history, United States history in Mankato. Your grandma was in Fort Snelling because of Lincoln. And his response was so precious. He said, oh, Kushi, I'm going to have to go tell my teacher that Lincoln is an Indian killer.
That's the Ponca part of it,
That's
by
the
way.
Ponca. Yes, we share grandchildren. My daughter-in-law is Ponca. Let's hear it for the Ponca. They're extra powerful. So I told him, I said, Takoja, there are some things that you cannot say in that system because it's a violent system. But Kunshi will go in there with you at the appropriate time, just like we will go into those MOUs. When we're invited, when you remember to invite us at those strategic, appropriate times to share those stories voluntarily, not by force. And so we have a job to walk together in becoming relatives, but I ask you to be very, I'm not sure what the word is. You help me find it later. But you also have to be protective of our knowledge because you know that when you came over on those boats, right? And a lot of your knowledge is gone from the European systems because it was taken. So help us, relatives, stand with us, and let's learn together. Thank you very much. Wo'opira.